And so we were able to use him. So when Devontae's back, now it kind of shuffled the deck a little bit differently. So it wasn't one specific person. I mean, obviously, you guys know, as my job as special teams coach is to always make sure, there could be a different combination every week, no differently than this week, where there could be a different combination of guys. And so it really wasn't one particular person. I'm going through the phases in my head. So that'll be the kind of case every week. Once we made the final decision on who the actives are, then it's my job to make sure, obviously, that we're kind of plugging in the right holes. You guys know last week in the game we had some injuries in game, and it's no different. When we have injuries like that within the game, all of a sudden some guys that maybe not had gotten a lot of reps in the past on special teams, all of a sudden they had to jump forward. And with the injuries last week in the game, that same situation came up. So
you obviously have a full grasp of what New England does on special teams, from playing them many times, watching tape. But does Bolden give you anything extra as far as intel that's helpful?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's a really good question. I mean, obviously we have Brandon here and Danny here. The Patriots, much like other teams, do a good job of changing things up in terms of calls and cadences and maybe tips and things like that. So, it's hard to go wholesale on one particular thing. I mean, I have no greater respect for any organization than theirs. I mean, they do a great job. Coach Belichick has a special teams background. Their special teams coach, Joe Judge, and I, we were both on the kickoff return committee together, and I spent a lot of time with him as well. I got a lot of respect for what they do. So, it's really just one individual game. It's not really, this particular game, just kind of getting game plan and ready for this one. I mean, are there? I've certainly picked Brandon's brain about some players and maybe some things about things like that, about personnel. But, when you get into the scheme stuff, it's very easily to change some different things. So we're not going to go wholesale on some of that stuff,
How would you describe Brandon's personality and leadership style?
I would call it A+. I mean, I think I mentioned before in here that kind of knew him as the player, Brandon Bolden the player, but getting to know Brandon Bolden the person, the leader, that kind of thing's been kind of neat for me. Really mature guy, really good football IQ. He's been really good, to be honest with you, with some of our younger players. We got a lot of younger guys playing on special teams. He's been in a role in New England, in the 6 years he was there, where he had to work with some younger players and kind of, be a mentor. And he's kind of been doing that. That's been really cool to watch. And only the few weeks he's been here is watching some of the younger players kind of gravitate towards him and knowing that he's got a really good background in special teams. A guy that right away kind of earned the players' trust and the coach's trust when he got here, just by his work ethic, his preparation. You watch this guy walk around the building, you watch him in meetings, things like that. He kind of really has a really good, professional mentality, if you will. We call it kind of a pro. He prepares like a pro. And he's a really good role model to have around here, not only on the field, because I think he does a great job between the lines, but watching the guy and watching what he does outside the lines has been really good for our younger guys as well.
2 field goal attempts. You made them both, but not a ton of opportunities for Jason.
Yeah. It's just the way games play out. I mean, there's going to be 3-game stretches where you have maybe 10 and 3-game stretches where you have 2. And that's cyclical, kind of, you look around the league, there's a lot of those situations. There's one kind of time we decided to go for it on 4th down there. It's more of a game plan decision, and there's a couple times where we're on the fringe of long punt, short punt, long field goal. So it just really hasn't had the opportunities. He's got to obviously stay ready, and because again, you could have a 3-game stretch where all of a sudden, he's called on a lot.
Do you have a sense of his range?
Oh, he's got a long range. Certainly leg strength's certainly not his issue. I mean, you guys saw certainly in the preseason, he had a couple attempts in the 50s. We stretched him out before. I mean, I've seen him make, some really long field goals. Again, it's really situational where we are in the game, score, all the field position things, because, the one thing you're always worried about on real long field goals is you miss it, obviously, your opponent gets the ball at that spot. So, but I'm certainly not worried about his strength. His leg strength is very, very good.
Seems like Matt has had a really strong first 3 games, Hawk. Have you seen anything different in him?
The only thing I've seen with Matt, I think really, you make that, a lot of times everyone uses that analogy, probably overuse the analogy about year 1 to year 2 with players and that big jump that players make. But I really think in this instance, for a specialist, there really is there's a correlation there because, you learn a lot on the run. You're going through it for the first time last year, and everything's brand new. And now you get to kind of press the reset button a little bit and go back, watch last year's film and say, okay, what didn't I do well? What can I do better? All those kinds of things. And I think Matt's a really intelligent guy. And so not only has the talent come into it, but I think he's gotten better at our situational punting. I think the directional stuff, the situational stuff, obviously he's got a decent amount of punts inside the 20, which has helped our field position. And so I think after going through it for a year, especially with a guy like him and his football IQ and kind of his mentality, this kind of getting a second go at it has really helped him. And that's not a surprise to me because, as I've said before, I really think he's still just getting started. I really think this guy's got a brilliant career ahead of him. He's got a really good mindset, really good temperament, really good work ethic, and so and the talent's there. So that's a pretty good combination.
What do you see with Spate?
Mm-hmm.
Bringing him in, the linebacker, I'm sure you studied a little bit.
Yeah, just getting to know him a little bit. Obviously, got a chance to watch him on film a little bit, and got a chance to talk to their special teams coach a little bit in Washington, and another guy that I know well, and trying to just kind of get a feel for what he's. I have an idea what he's played positionally. Just getting to know the guy a little bit. Really liked what he's done the last couple of days in just terms of jumping right in and kind of catching up. It's kind of bad. I told him yesterday he came out to practice, hey, this is a baptism by fire. So kind of learning on the run as we go. It's one of those deals that, again, as a special teams coach, this is one of our deals. You got to get guys ready to play, and so kind of going through and getting him as much work as we can here, and kind of getting caught up on all the mental stuff. But so far, so good. We'll see how the rest of the week plays out with him.
I wanted to ask you. You've been a part of so many different regimes here, so many different Dolphins teams, but nobody's had success since 2008. I know you weren't part of that in Foxborough. Mm-hmm. What is it that makes playing up there so challenging and so difficult?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, obviously it's a tough road environment. They've obviously had a lot of success at home, and I think a lot of the reasons are you look at statistically what they do, and they don't turn the ball over a lot as a team altogether, but they don't turn the ball over a lot at home. They do a really, really good job of situational football there. I mean, again, take obviously the crowd and all that stuff, the weather. I mean, there's a lot of factors. But more importantly, they're as good of a situational football team as any in the league in terms of winning the situations and not self-destructing or certainly we call it unforced errors, if you will. That's one of the things they do really well. I've been part of teams here. We've gone up there, as you guys know, we've jumped on them early and gotten early leads, and somehow, some way they came back. And by the same token, I've been on teams that have gone up there and dug a hole early. And we've battled back. So we've had a little bit of everything up there, have kind of a mixed bag. But I do think the beginning of the game there is important. I do think the start of the game that they have a knack of jumping on teams early there and kind of get the snowball rolling downhill, if you will. And I think it's important for us every week, certainly to do that. But certainly on the road, when you get on the road, your start to the game is going to be very important. And I think that'll be the case this week.
Rizzi, who so far this season has stood out on special teams in areas that don't show up on the stat sheet?
Areas that don't show up on the stat sheet. There's a lot of those. I like talking about this. This is down my avenue right here. It's special teams is obviously sometimes not the focal point of the game, and there's been a lot of little things that have done a really, guys have done a good job. Walt Aikens has really played a significant role on our punt, not only with Matt Hawk punting the ball, but covering the ball. The last couple of weeks, Cornell Armstrong has done a really good job for us in terms of coverage. A guy that might not be a household name, and certainly a guy that is kind of an ascending player. Guys like Perry and Bolden, those kind of guys have been solid, really solid for us in the game. Stephon Anthony is a guy last week that really played a very solid game all the way around. Probably his best game on special teams since he's been here. And so little things like that. There's been some younger players that have been thrust into some roles, because of where we are in terms of roster. And some of those young guys have been, a little bit hot and cold, but for the most part, we've been pretty consistent. That's what we got to continue to be. You play a team like we're playing this week, and as I've said to our guys many times, you got to be really on top of your stuff. I mean, they do a really good job of film study and kind of know what you put out there, and that's going to be important for us this week.
You call it a flyer or a gunner when you're, huh?
Our punt, when we're punting the ball, we call them gunners. Some people call them flyers, yeah. It's it's special teams lingo. Some people call it a split end, and some people call it an X-receiver, and some people call it a flanker, and some people on punting, we call the wide guys gunners, and then the guys that are blocking them jammers. Jammers, yeah.
How difficult is it for Walt Aikens in particular to take on two jammers and consistently win?
It's a very unique technique. We call that a vice technique. When two jammers go out and block one gunner, which you see a lot in this league. Sometimes you see it on one side, not the other, but obviously Walt has been really productive, so he draws a lot of attention. So a lot of times he'll get the vice in particular. And
so you call that the vice?
We call that a vice. When two guys go out, there's two players, two DBs usually go out and play on the jammer. We call that a vice technique. If there's one guy and then one guy shows up late, we call that a crunch technique. But essentially it's a 2-on-1, whether they're on the line of scrimmage or whether one's on the line and one's off the line. That's a technique we spend an awful amount of time on. Go back to our OTAs. It's one of the things we start working on like right away because it's a very difficult task. There's a lot of little nuances that go into that, a lot of fundamentals and techniques, knowing how to use a sideline, knowing that when you can use a sideline, your re-entry onto the field. You see a lot of penalty flags thrown. A lot of times a guy gets out of bounds and doesn't re-enter the right way and stays in the paint, so to speak. Know when to release inside, outside, leverage, hand placement. There's a lot of little things. So we spend a crazy amount of time on that because, two good jammers can take away a gunner in a heartbeat. And, we want everybody, whether to get in 2-on-1 or 1-on-1, obviously to be down by the ball. And so Walt is a guy that's gotten better and better and better and better. He's obviously he's a physically strong guy, and he can run. But that technique, sometimes it doesn't matter how strong you are. You get 2-on-1. If you're not technique savvy, you're going to lose that battle. And so, that's something that, we say, heck, we spend a lot of time on. I could clinic for a long time about that. Just little things, your flat release, your hand placement, your speed, your angle, all those things, your re-enter, your finish, your pad level, come to balance. There's a bunch of terms that we use. And so it's a really, really unique technique. And Walt has gotten, really improved as we've gone on. He's really working with some of our younger guys, Torrey, Cornell, some of these younger guys that go out there, Mo Smith, and trying to speed them up along as well.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.